The Daily Jaws 50th Anniversary interview series is a collection of amazing conversations exploring the legacy of Steven Spielberg's screen adaptation of Jaws through the eyes of the fans. We'll be talking to famous fans, shark experts, people whose lives have been changed by the movie, and those that were there that helped to make the film. Today's episode has been made possible by Stern Pinball, the world's largest designer and manufacturer of arcade-quality pinball games. But we'll be telling you more about them later. We'll also be telling you about two amazing organisations that are very close to our hearts. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
That movie was made out of sheer will. Having been on a lot of movies in my career, the ones that traumatize you, it's hard to shake. I saw Jaws 3 in the theater with Tom Savini. Tom Savini and I went to the theater to see Jaws 3 together. The shark in the museum is a celebration of every film technician that worked on the movie. The look on Roy's face was something I'll never forget.
Hey guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws with another exclusive 50th anniversary interview. Today's guest literally needs no introduction. To list his credits would be an episode in itself. However, his work has continued to define modern filmmaking and inspire storytellers today. He's also one of the biggest Jaws fans I know and has been a massive source of support for the Daily Jaws behind the scenes for many, many years. It gives me great personal pleasure and excitement to welcome the one and only Mr. Greg Nicotero to the Daily Jaws. Greg, welcome.
That was great. Well done. Look,
Thank you.
You did it one take. That's impressive.
Thank you very much. Unbelievable.
Yeah, you're hired.
Thanks. First of all, how are you? It's been a while since we've seen each other.
It has. I'm doing great. You know, it's very exciting times. I just got done shooting a new TV series that I'm super excited about. Mm-hmm. And, you know, more and more people are all talking about, you know, this amazing milestone that's creeping up on us from the depths, which I'm really, really excited about. And I think the more I think about it, and the more I talk about it, the more excited I get, and the more it just reminds me about the strength of cinema and the memories of what it was like seeing a film like Jaws in the theater for the first time, and how important it is that people continue to go to the movies, you know.
Let's go back to the beginning of your Jaws story, Greg. When did you first see Jaws, and what do you remember about that experience?
Well, you know, look, I'm 62 years old. So when Jaws came out, I was 12. I just turned 12. So I was at a very formative age where movies, it was all about movies. You know, I mean, I love disaster movies. You know, the year before Jaws was, you know, Earthquake and The Towering Inferno. And then before that was Poseidon Adventure. And so I loved all of those movies that had took big swings for special effects. My parents are huge movie buffs. And I remember vividly, I saw the movie June 21st. So it was the day after it came out at the Gateway Theater downtown Pittsburgh, which is where I subsequently later saw Dawn of the Dead for the first time. And my parents had seen it the night before. So they wanted to make sure it was okay for myself and my younger brother, who was 10. Mm-hmm. At the time. They wanted to make sure it was okay for us to see it. So they, interestingly enough, deemed it safe. Thank God. And I will never forget, to this day, we had dinner at a restaurant downtown Pittsburgh, and then we went to the movie theater, and we're waiting in line to go in, because back then you didn't have multiplexes and all these huge theaters. So if you wanted to see a movie, you had to wait in line. And with Jaws was one of those situations where a lot of times the line went around the block. You know, that doesn't happen anymore. So waiting in line, and we get into the lobby, and I'm looking at the lobby cards. And there was the one lobby card of Hooper in the cage with you just see a little hint of the shark. And I looked at it and I was like, God, that shark is huge. And look, I was the kind of kid that I read the books, the novelizations, before I saw the movie. I don't know why. Maybe I was impatient. I read the novelization for Star Wars. I read the novelization for Jaws. because I was so excited. Back then you see the preview, you start getting excited and you want to learn as much about the movie as you can, and the internet didn't exist. So the only way that you could learn about it was by reading the book.
Yeah.
So until the movie came out, of course. So I read the novelization for the book. And, I always remember the description. I was telling somebody the other day, the description of Chrissy's remains on the beach in the book. And so I had that in my head. So the first time I saw Jaws, when they step up to it, I closed my eyes because I was like, oh, I don't want to see this. Like that's what you did back then when you're a 12-year-old kid and you're scared.
Yeah.
I closed my eyes. I think I had probably seen Jaws maybe 7 times before I got the nerve up to actually look. And then when I did, I'm like, oh, that's not so bad, because it was the hand and the crabs and the hair and everything.
Yeah.
But I remember the lobby cards. I remember sitting in the theater when Ben Gardner's head popped out, because for some strange reason, at that exact moment, I had turned to my brother or my mom, and all I saw was every head in the theater recoil at the exact same time, like a wave.
Wow.
And then, of course, when Teddy Grossman is killed in the estuary, I like literally my jaw hit the floor, because when you see the shark, how big it is compared to a person, and it's in the water. That's probably my favorite shot in the movie, is that shot where the shark is profile and Teddy Grossman's there and the shark goes underwater and they pull him down with it. Because at that point on, I was like, okay, they're all screwed. They're dead. That thing's way too big. It's going to eat everybody. When Clint was getting eaten, I do think my mom tried to cover my eyes, if I remember correctly, or maybe my brother's eyes. But I was like, no, I want to see the shark. I wanted to see the shark. So that was my first. And then through that summer, the movie played over and over again. I think by September, I had seen it 10 or 11 times, because I just kept going back to the theater to see it. And, probably more than that. But I just remember we were vacationing in Florida at the end of that summer. And like nobody wanted to go in the ocean. Like we're like, what do I want to do? Let's go to the beach. I'm like, no, screw that. Let's go to the movie. Let's go see Jaws.
That's amazing, because again, if anyone invents time travel, I think one of the things I will do is go back and watch Jaws, June 20th, 1975, just to experience that. Because someone sort of, I can't remember who it was, but someone said it was like the Beatles playing on Ed Sullivan. When that movie came out, it was just so big. But then,
it was so big, yeah.
It was, and it was everywhere, the marketing, whether it was TV spots, the music, lunchboxes, posters, whatever it was. Jaws was kind of inescapable, literally, and whatever. What did Jaws do to 12-year-old Greg, though? Like, that's obviously sparked something in your imagination or your mind, because all of a sudden, look where you are. You're at the peak of your game in terms of what you do now for a living.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of blew my mind, I don't even think I could have put into words the impact that it had on me. But I was obsessed with wanting to learn everything about the making of the movie. And of course, the biggest, there were 3 things at the time. There was Carl Gottlieb's book, The Jaws Log. There was Edith Blake's book, Making of the Movie Jaws. And then there was the Time Magazine Summer of the Shark issue that had the painting by Punchatz on the cover. And there was a picture of the shark in the book, which now I look at that picture, I'm like, okay, because I always remember there was this weird white line on the head of the shark. And I was like, oh, well, now I know they probably cut it open, fixed the mechanism, glued it back closed, patched it, and they hadn't painted it yet. But that's where that photo is. But I was obsessed with wanting to learn more about the shark. And obviously I wasn't alone, because as the summer progressed, and there was articles in Newsweek about, meet one of the stars of Jaws that, you don't think about. So I remember reading Carl's book and being a little disappointed, because the book was very cheeky. Like, he really didn't, oh, is that a real shark? Or is that, like, I remember there was photos in there of the camera operators that are clearly in the MGM tank with the shark. But the way he captioned it was like, oh, sharks in Australia can grow up to 20 feet in length. So he was being a little cheeky about it. And I just remember going, I just want to know, tell me how they made the movie. So then when Edith Blake's book came out and it had photos of the shark. So I was in 7th grade. I literally wrote my name and my phone number and what grade I was in the book in case I lost it at school. That's how obsessed I was with it. And I still have it. So for me, it really was, I think, subconsciously, the movie had such a dramatic impact on me that I really wanted to understand why. Why did it have such a big impact on me? And not only why, but how did they make it? Like, what were the ingredients, that the filmmakers utilized, and how did they mix them and shake them? And, it's funny because there's a lot of talk about, that being sort of like the first big summer blockbuster where they went, wait a minute, we could release it in 453 theaters instead of 200 theaters, and we'll make more money. And then, we can merchandise it. We can, like you were saying, we can make towels, and we can make Halloween masks, and we can make cups, and we can make T-shirts. And so I really think that Jaws was one of the first movies that they kind of went, wait a minute, why don't we just make a big splash, no pun intended, with everything. And I think that had a lot to do with it, because you couldn't escape it. It was on the bookshelves. There were trailers and TV spots everywhere. And I loved that you couldn't escape it. I loved that it was everywhere, and that you felt like if you hadn't seen it, you needed to see it. And if you had seen it, you needed to see it again. It was just an amazing time.
So, Greg, tell us about the new Jaws at 50 documentary that's coming out that you're a producer on.
Yeah, it's I love it. I mean, I was really excited to be a part of it. Laurent and I met in 1995 when he was producing the documentary for Jaws that was on the Laserdisc, which was still one of the definitive documentaries, and it's the most thorough piece of filmmaking. And the funny thing about it was, Laurent and I met, and I have a pretty substantial collection of Jaws posters, and he said, hey, do you mind if I borrow your posters? And because I need to put some stuff behind all the people that I'm interviewing. And I said, sure. So he took them all. And then he brings them all back a couple weeks later. And then I see the documentary, and Spielberg is sitting in front of my posters. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then I watched the credits, and it says he gave me a credit on the documentary. And at that point, I was kind of like, well, that's as close to Jaws as I'm ever going to get. Little did I know. But I was really, really excited. I had done an interview. He did a book called Ultraviolent Cinema, and he did a section on Tarantino. And that's how we met. And then, subsequently since then, we've stayed really good friends. And when this documentary came about, he had reached out to me because, Laurent's not really tied into the fandom of it as much as you would imagine. You would think, oh, Laurent knows everything about Jaws. But he knows everything from the technical standpoint and from the cast and the crew. And he doesn't really have as much experience dealing with the impact that the movie has had on other people. And I think what was fun about this was I was able to say to him, oh, there's people that you should talk to. There's a lot of people that are going to have a really unique voice and a unique opportunity to talk about the longevity of the documentary. So you being one of them, of course.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the documentary is that Steven plays such a prominent part in it that it's almost like he's taking you on the journey of the making of the movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what I appreciated when I watched the rough cut, was that it really does feel like you're hearing it directly from him, which I love, because no one else can really speak to Jaws except for Steven Spielberg. I love the fact that there's other filmmakers in there and there's other people in there that talk about how the movie affected them, because it's not just about it being a great movie or it defying the odds, but it's also about how it shaped future cinema by inspiring writers, actors, directors to follow their passion or want to learn how to do that. That was one of the biggest things I'm most proud of in terms of the restoration of the shark. Is, to me, the shark in the museum is a celebration of every film technician that worked on the movie and worked on every movie subsequent to that. Yeah. Because it signifies so much, and it signifies, the potential naivete of the director, who was like, yeah, we're not going to shoot it in a tank, let's shoot it on the ocean. And that movie was made out of sheer will. And I think that's what I love about it. And it shows, and there's so much great stuff in it. And again, the Calicord, I think it was Calicord that told me the story about when the shark wasn't working, and they're like, well, why don't we just tow the barrels around? And then the barrels were just, we'll just insinuate that the shark is right underneath it. That was something that came up out of sheer necessity, and I always imagine, like, what would Jaws have been like if the shark worked perfectly for every shot? We'd probably see way more of the shark. And it may not have had the same impact or been quite as effective as the movie that we know and love now, if there would have been more of it or not enough. I don't know, because I forget how many minutes of the shark there is in the movie. But
it's about 4.5.
4:19 or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
So, and I it still blows my mind, just the accomplishment of that movie. When you're watching the film and you see the orca going out into the ocean, and then you see those beautiful wide shots with the sounds of seagulls, you really do feel isolated. You feel like you're alone out in the ocean and there's nobody else there. And how are they going to get out of that particular situation? And that to me is that it becomes a very focused movie, and then it's sort of when it opens up, and it's like, oh, you're going out into its habitat now, and that it can be anywhere. It's just terrifying.
The thing. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I think just coming back to the documentary for a moment, I think there are two things that I found about the story of Jaws in terms of the production. I mean, obviously, just the production itself was so difficult. I mean, everything that went wrong did go wrong. But to your point, probably the right things went wrong, because it meant we saw less of the shark, we got more of the character, and we invested in that. And when you look at all the classics, it is about the characters. Aliens isn't about the aliens, it's about Ripley and her story. Jaws is about, Quint, Hooper and Brody, or more specifically Brody. And when you look at Jaws through the lens of Steven Spielberg 50 years later, and I think it was a really smart decision by Laurent to make that the through thread, the narrative of the documentary this time, rather than just going back over the production and with some new discoveries. I think there were two things. One, Jaws, part of the legacy for Jaws, I think, is about inspiration, whether that's filmmaking or shark conservation. I think the other thing as well is, because I spoke to Laurent, I think think it was last week, and we talked about the 50th documentary. And I watched the previous one, the 1995 one, in preparation, and I paid very close attention to Stephen. And the difference, the way Stephen talks about Jaws now as when he did back in 95 is quite remarkable. And I mentioned this to Laurent, and I don't know how you feel about it, but when I watch Stephen talking about Jaws now, it feels like he's got a real sense of peace with Jaws. I think it was quite a big, I don't want to use the word trauma, but it feels like he's at peace with Jaws. And I think he's at peace with the fact that it has gone on to become this ever-inspiring piece of work that he's delivered, despite of the production hell that he went through to do it. I mean, I don't know. Did you pick up on it?
I'm sure. Look, I mean, having been on a lot of movies in my career, the ones that traumatize you, it's hard to shake. I mean, it really is. There's been a few movies that I've worked on that were just like shaking it is hard. And the fact that the movie was as successful and as celebrated as it was allows us all to appreciate it. And probably, look, if Jaws had flopped, who knows what kind of career he would have had? Who knows? You just don't know. But, you know, I think there's a lot of vindication, you know, and I know John Carpenter and I talked about this, about The Thing, the fact that when The Thing came out, it was the same summer as E.T. and The Thing was very universally panned, but now it has gone on to have a tremendous following and great, and has inspired a lot of great filmmakers. They had a screening here in LA with Bong Joon-ho a couple weeks ago, and he hosted a Q&A with John Carpenter, and he talked about how much John inspired his filmmaking. So we can be grateful and move through life knowing that this art form inspires people. I mean, it used to. Now it's just fucking superhero movies and video game movies, which makes me want to cry in a giant pool of my own tears because I miss the maverick spirit of those filmmakers, you know, Scorsese and Coppola and Paul Schrader and Spielberg and John Badham and like the, you know, the Easy Riders, Raging Bulls era, which is the greatest book if you haven't read that, and you should, because it talks literally about how filmmaking changed from auteur filmmakers to like, hey, we can market this movie differently. And it's a really great book. But, you know, back when filmmaking was in the hands of people who knew nothing and didn't know how to do anything else except make movies. Now they're just making content. And now, you know, reviewers are much more interested in how much money it's going to make, not if it's actually a good movie. It drives me crazy.
You're very uniquely placed within the Jaws world, but also within the movie industry. Given everything, obviously it's been 50 years since Jaws, do you think Jaws and the advent of the blockbuster has been good for the industry, or do you think we're kind of entering almost like not a post-Jaws, but post-blockbuster era?
Well, you know, look, it's different. I mean, I think the fact that Jaws was, like we were saying earlier, Jaws was everywhere, you couldn't escape it, was a marketing ploy. And it was a marketing ploy to make money, you know, and that's what studios are supposed to do. They're supposed to make money. But I feel like it certainly changed things, and it did shift the studio system from embracing auteur filmmakers and putting more money into marketing and advertising and making more prints. By the time Star Wars came out, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if George Lucas took a play out of the Jaws merchandising when they saw Star Wars, and they're like, well, what do we care about merchandising? Because that hadn't really been a big, you know, that was 2 years earlier. It wasn't a big deal, you know, which is probably why he was able to hold on to the merchandising rights, because he probably looked at Jaws and went, these guys, look at all the, you know, the stuff that they made, books and soundtrack albums and T-shirts. But, you know, it's so different now, and it really breaks my heart, because now it's all about box office expectations. This is my Greg Nicotero rant for like the last year.
Go.
They'll report about how much money they think the movie will make. We think the movie is destined to make $15 million this weekend. Then the next article will be, it's going to perform below expectations. It's going to perform above expectations. Oh, the movie's not really performing based on how much money they thought it would make. There's never really a conversation about, is it a good movie or not? It's a conversation about, is it exceeding or not meeting box office expectations? And the problem now is people read that, they look at Rotten Tomatoes and they go, oh, well, it's not making very much money, so it's probably, I just don't have time. I'm not going to see it. They don't see it. People don't go.
Yeah.
And, you know, I want to still see movie theaters playing movies in 5 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, the fact that the Minecraft movie, everybody's all, oh my God, wasn't it amazing? Are you fucking kidding me? The Minecraft movie is what we're celebrating. It's a marketing ploy. And yeah, it's a big video game, but you know, like you make superhero movies and video game movies and that's it. And that's like 90% of it. And then there's like this 10% of real movies. And, you know, I did a search not long ago because I always talk about the greatest in my generation, the greatest era, the greatest year of movies. And I think it was 81, might have been 81 or 82, which was, I think it was both of those years. Because if you look at it, and it's like The Thing, Creepshow, Road Warrior, Star Trek II, E.T., Poltergeist, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Escape from New York, you know, or the, you know, there was this 2 summers, and it was like every weekend there was another big genre movie that came out, and you were like, oh, it's Friday. Oh, we're going to go to the movies tonight. And American Werewolf in London, The Howling. I mean, you could go on and on and on, but there was that 81, 82, I think. And I'm so grateful that I was around and that I was able to go to the theater to see all of those movies, because it was a roller coaster. You were going on a new adventure every week with a new filmmaker, and you were experiencing these new worlds. And it was literally the most fertile, inspiring time to be able to see those movies, go to the theater and see The Road Warrior and Creepshow and Blade Runner. And it was just, I miss it. And I desperately hope that other people feel the same way that I do. And we can try to find a way to shift some attention into that kind of world. Because I'll tell you, back then, nobody gave a shit. The general public didn't care how much money a movie made. And they shouldn't care how much money a movie makes when they decide whether or not they want to see it. But that's not what the world is now.
Yeah.
It's breaking my heart. I'll be honest.
Yeah, no. I'm totally with you on this for many, many reasons. But I think you're right. It was a really exciting time in cinema because you had these young filmmakers, new voices with new ideas, with the newest technology and the greatest teams around them at their fingertips to just try something new. You know, I mean, just some of the movies you've mentioned there are just completely and utterly different, but it's real people who understand how to tell a good story, not make box office dollar. And a few years ago, I think it would probably get on for 5, maybe even 6 years ago, Jaws was re-released here in the UK. It was on BFI IMAX, and it was also in the 3D restoration, which I don't know if you've seen, but it's incredible.
Of course.
I absolutely loved it. I was very worried about it. I thought, oh my God, this is going to be terrible, but it was brilliant. The team that did that were incredible. But the thing is, what happened was people were bringing people in to watch Jaws for the first time, like kids or whoever it was. And like you used the word roller coaster. Absolutely. Yeah. It was like being back in the cinema back in 1975. It's like a good story and a good movie will play for the first time in the same way, no matter when you watch it.
You know, movies like Jaws made such an impact because it was so groundbreaking and so different at the time. And now everything's easy because you shoot it on a volume stage or it's green screen, and there's really not a lot of technical challenges. The big thing you have to worry about now is like, is the script any good or the actors any good? But like those challenges of how the hell are we going to do this? How are we going to build this shark? How are we going to make the boat sink? How those challenges were such an integral part of filmmaking back in the day. You know, I always think about like you shoot Lawrence of Arabia and you have like 1,000 extras. Now you don't need any of that stuff. I mean, it makes it easier, but part of the blood, sweat, and tears that made filmmakers great was that they endured those challenges. You know, they made Jaws, they made Alien, they made Close Encounters or American Werewolf in London. You know, I still look at Jim Cameron's Aliens as probably one of the greatest technically accomplished films that I've ever seen. And I read an interview with him recently where he's like, yeah, if we made that movie today, it would all be CGI. And I'm thinking, man, the technicians, the ingenuity of quarter scale, miniature, full size, rear screen projection, those tricks that were basically built the DNA of filmmaking. I think those are critical for telling stories, and I miss that. I really do, and that's why I still have my practical makeup effects company at KNB, and I still fight to do things, you know, practically, because the artistry and the technicians and the sheer volume that you have to know to build stuff like that is it's inspiring.
Hey guys, it's Ross. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the series. I just wanted to take a moment to tell you a little bit about some of the organisations that we've been working with that help make this episode possible. Stern Pinball, the oldest and largest designer and manufacturer in arcade quality pinball games. Here is their Jaws game.
Fire the harpoon! Shoot! Fast fish.
Well, nothing's easy, is it?
This shark will eat anything.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Pretty cool, huh? Well, Stern don't only make pinball machines, they've also made a generous donation to the two organisations that we're spotlighting throughout the series. Minorities in Shark Sciences, or MISS for short, a non-profit founded in 2020 that champions diversity in shark, ray and marine sciences. MISS creates equitable opportunities for historically underrepresented communities through hands-on programs and believes that diverse scientists bring diverse ideas, driving the innovation essential for ocean conservation. Representation matters, and MISS is making sure the next generation sees a place for themselves in marine biology. Learn more and support their mission at missalesmo.org. The mission of the Tourette Association of America is to provide help and hope to those affected by Tourette syndrome, tic disorders, and associated conditions through awareness, research, and support. It's the only national organisation serving the community and works to raise awareness, advance research, and provide ongoing support to patients and families impacted by Tourette syndrome and tic disorders. To this end, the Tourette Association of America directs a network of 31 chapters, 83 support groups, and recognises 18 centres of excellence across the country. It's a non-profit organisation and is extremely close to the heart of not just Jeffrey Kramer, but also his family. Guys, thanks for listening. Let's get back to the conversation. I'd like to drop by and say hello, Greg, if that's okay.
Oh, good Lord.
Oh, come on. Come on, man. Somebody's got to be
I'm so excited.
I love this man. He's the best.
You sure?
I would have come over. We could have done that. We could have done the interview side by side.
And we know each other through Jaws because there's no bigger fan. And I've actually been to his office his home, and I'd rather go to his home. His home has the same shark as the museum.
Yes.
In a living room. It was so big. I took a picture of it with the camera. I couldn't get it all in.
Honestly, I'm kind of glad.
I think
It's kind of amazing. Well, look, the funny thing about that shark is, when we were doing the restoration for the Academy Museum, we had talked about making a lightweight one because that one wasn't that's in the museum wasn't used in the movie. That was the one that was made from the original molds and was on display at Universal. And it weighs like 3,000 pounds. It's really heavy because it has big steel armature in it. So we had to mold the head, we had to mold the tails, we had to mold a bunch of parts of it anyway. And I had said, well, we should just make one for the museum that's lightweight so you can hang it and there's no danger. And they said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then like 2 months later, like, no, we're just going to hang the regular one that we got from the junkyard. And
you come up the escalator, you think it could fall on you. You gotta.
It's scary. Yeah, but the only bummer I will say, I mean, I love it, is that you can't really get a sense of how really big it is.
No, you don't, Ken. Yeah.
It's like going to the Smithsonian and you see, like the Spirit of St. Louis, and you see all these spaceships, like spaceships and airplanes, but you never get a chance to like stand next to it and realize that the tail itself is probably 8 feet tall, and it's just massive. And I think,
and when you stand near it, you can see. Like when we went, we took pictures when he was really finishing it for the museum. This is years ago. They came out, and when we were all standing, and we were dwarfed by it. I mean, there were 5 big guys there, and we were dwarfed by it.
I think my favorite. So he's talking about a day when the NPR came and did an interview with us. Yeah, and Joe came, and Jeff came, and Roy Arbogast came.
Yeah,
the look on Roy's face was something I'll never forget, because he walked in, and it was like he was looking at an old girlfriend or somebody, an old, like World War, war buddy that he hadn't seen in decades. The look on his face was like, wow. Like I felt like if I could have gotten into Roy's head and really understood all of the memories that he was going through. And I think, was Kevin Pike there too? I want to say Kevin.
No, I didn't see Kevin. He wasn't there when we took the picture.
I think Kevin came later, because the funny thing is Kevin came by and looked at it, and he's like, wow, the mouth feels small. And one of the things that's interesting, if you really look at that shark sculpture in detail, is it's got a lot of character to it. They sculpted a lot of the folds. Even in the jowls, there's some room there for the mechanism. But I think once they made the skin and they put the skin over the mechanism, it distorted it a little bit. So the shark doesn't look like it was intended to look sculpturally, because, and again, when you put the shark in the water, there's the shot. I was actually looking at the Teddy Grossman shot this morning for some reason. And when the shark goes under, you can see water shoot out of the eyeball for a split second before.
See, I would never have known. I could never.
Wow.
I don't have.
Never know. Look, I mean,
kind of high end is unbelievable.
Jeff, it's 50 fucking years, and this was the first time I ever noticed it was today. Here,
really?
I'm going to show it to you.
But think about it. The idea that we're talking about a shark, the key mechanical piece of a movie 50 years later is stunning.
Yeah.
And, for Joe, I know it was emotional. I know it was so emotional. He's so inured to it, I'm sure, by now.
He is.
That is some accomplishment. And, a famous movie director once called Joe and asked him to paint a shark in his swimming pool. And he did. This is decades ago. But he did it. But Joe was the greatest quick shark drawer you've ever seen. He was so good.
Oh, his
Yeah.
concept work was amazing. In the designing Jaws book, it's incredible.
The way Joe approached anything was stunning. He and Mr. Nicotero are in the same class.
Wait, hold on. I'm going to show you guys. You ready?
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
hard to see because the quality isn't good.
These are Greg's.
But
yay!
If you look at that, and then as the shark goes under right there, a bunch of water shoots out of the eyeball.
Oh, wow.
I never noticed that before because I was thinking about I was talking about some 50th anniversary Jaws thing, and I was like, oh yeah, the estuary victim. And then I looked at that footage today, and I was like, oh, I never noticed that water shot out of the eyeball. Nor did I care, but
I've got a question for you, Greg, because I noticed something a couple of years ago. I might have told you about it, possibly, but there's a Michael Brody moment right at the beginning of the movie, which is terrifying, and no one spotted it. So, you know where Michael? So in the kitchen, when he's come back in from playing on the swings and he's cut his hand, he's obviously bleeding.
Vampire.
Right?
yeah,
Vampire, exactly.
I got cut. I got hit by a vampire.
Yeah.
That's it. Then there's a shot from outside the house where Michael comes out and then Chief Brody comes out with Ellen. If you watch Michael in that shot, he's running around the back of the house with snorkel gear on and he's got his hand bleeding. And I'm like, I don't think anyone's ever spotted that. And I posted it up on social and everyone's like, never seen that before. And I was just like,
Wow,
that's such a terrifying moment. And it's so subtle. Yeah, if you watch that moment.
I've noticed it before. I noticed it, but I never really thought about, he's going into, so it's his fault. Well, not his fault. It's
but
the shark, maybe the blood in the water. Because you know what I thought when Alex Kittner dies and they're all in the water splashing and you see all the hands do that. That's what I always thought that attracted the shark was he went into the water.
That's what I thought. And then obviously he's on his own, isolated. So the shark would probably go for him, if that makes sense. So yeah. It's just amazing.
Woman asked me, she said, oh my God, Jaws is 50. How old were you when you made it? And I thought, oh my God. I said, now I have to be honest about my age. I was 9. I said, she didn't believe me, I think. Oh boy.
Well, they were hiring deputies young back in the day.
Yes, thank you very, very much. Well, I was never the most mature person in a room, but I had hair. God.
Well, I'll tell you, the funniest thing is that when I talk about Jaws, people go, oh, did you work on Jaws? Because I think they just assume that because I speak so effusively about it that I worked on it. And I'm like, no, I was 12. I was the same age as Jeff.
I get it.
I was 12 and Jeff was 9. I was older than you.
Yeah. Well, in some ways you are. But listen, I was once sitting having dinner in a restaurant and I look over at the bar and there's Greg Nicotero. Now I know who he is. I didn't know that he knew who I was and whatever, but because we really didn't know each other then. And now, because of this movie, we met and he's one of my dearest friends. I tell you that. And we waved. I said hello. I think I did. And then we're leaving and I go to pay my bill and it says, oh, no. The gentleman at the bar bought you dinner. And I thought, whoa. He was so kind. It was so decent and good of him. And we've been friends ever since.
Yeah.
For sure.
Can I share my Greg story? I've got a good Greg story.
Oh, boy.
Let's hear it.
This is good. So
it doesn't include shark teeth, does it?
Oh, no. It's a good one. It's good. Greg knows all about this. And he put me in a state of anxiety for about 5 years because of this. So
we're all Greg. Yeah.
It's my job.
So this is when we first met. So it's a bit of backstory. I obviously just started running the Daily Jaws, fairly early days. And I woke up one Sunday morning and my Instagram had just blown up. New followers, likes, comments, everything. And I'm like, what is going on? Anyway, someone DM'd me and they said, Greg Nicotero has reshared your post. And I'm like, what? So I looked, I'm like, oh, holy cow. Okay. So I'm like, one, thank you. That really helped give us a boost and a bit more visibility and a lot more people started to find us. But then we started to DM, and I'm like, okay, not only is he following us and sharing our content, I'm now talking to the legend himself. So I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, Greg then invites me to London. He goes, would you like to meet up at a Walker store? And I'm like, absolutely, yeah, of course. So I go pick up my ticket, I go in, and I meet Greg, and I've got my little Daily Jaws board that I want him to sign. And he's signing some autographs and gets through his queue. Anyway, I walk up, say, hi, Greg, very nice to meet you. And we start to talk. And then one of the most amazing Jaws memories in terms of my Jaws journey happened. Greg pulled out his phone, obviously in a Jaws poster phone case, and he just casually went into his phone camera roll, and he didn't even say anything. He just showed me his phone, made sure I was looking at it, and then just started to swipe. And I'm like, I think I know what I'm looking at. And I remember this moment, Greg. I said, is that what I think it is? And you went, what do you think it is? And I said, is that the junkyard shark that's gone missing? And he went, might be. And I'm like, don't play this cool. Anyway, I'm like, have you got it? And he was like, yeah. I said, what are you doing? And he told me the plan about the restoration for the Academy Museum. And I was like, oh my God. I had to keep that secret for 5 years, Greg. Honestly, that was funny. That was so tough. That's why I lost my hair.
I didn't realize that's what I think it was.
I think it was about that. I think it was about that. I think it was about 4 or 5 years.
Because they look. I mean, before the Academy acquired that shark, I tried, like 25 years ago, I tried to buy it from the junkyard. I went in and I just said to the guy, "I'll give you $5,000 for it," and they were like, it's kind of up there. And the guy who had that You Pick Parts lot was just a pack rat. And I said, look, I'll arrange to get it down. There won't be any sweat, and I'll give you a couple $1,000s. And then when Joe Maddalena had that show on Sci-Fi Channel, when he had Profiles in History, or the Collector Show, he went there and interviewed the guy. And I was like, man, how do I get this shark? I just couldn't get the guy to let go of it because, Universal would just sort of let him have whatever shit was left on the lot. He would just take it. And then I found out that the lot was closing and that he had donated it to the museum. So Joe and I went down to El Monte or somewhere, wherever the shark was, and took pictures of it and looked at it. And that's when sort of the initial discussions about like, oh yeah, we're going to get this museum open in a couple of years and we want to do this restoration of the shark. I could tell you, I'll find it and text it to you because I have photos. I'll bet you if I look in my Jaws photo album on my phone.
You save everything. You're really good.
I try to. Okay, here. July 25th, 2016.
Yeah.
So it was 2016 when I saw that, when I went down and they had acquired the show.
God, it's 9 years ago.
Yeah, really.
What?
I was 9.
You're 9. Yeah. You're perpetually 9, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Woman asked me, she said, oh my God, Jaws is 50. How old were you when you made it? And I thought, oh my God. I said, now I have to be honest about my age. I was 9. I said, she didn't believe me, I think. Oh boy.
Well, they were hiring deputies young back in the day.
Yes, thank you very, very much. Well, I was never the most mature person in a room, but I had hair. God.
Well, I'll tell you, the funniest thing is that when I talk about Jaws, people go, oh, did you work on Jaws? Because I think they just assume that because I speak so effusively about it that I worked on it. And I'm like, no, I was 12. I was the same age as Jeff.
I get it.
I was 12 and Jeff was 9. I was older than you.
Yeah. Well, in some ways you are. But listen, I was once sitting having dinner in a restaurant, and I look over at the bar, and there's Greg Nicotero. Now, I know who he is. I didn't know that he knew who I was and whatever, but because we really didn't know each other then. And now, because of this movie, we met, and he's one of my dearest friends. I tell you that. And we waved. I said hello. I think I did. And then we're leaving, and I go to pay my bill, and it says, oh, no. The gentleman at the bar bought you dinner. And I thought, whoa. he was so kind. It was so decent and good of him, and we've been friends ever since.
Yeah.
For sure.
Can I share my Greg story? I've got a good Greg story.
Oh boy, this I want
Let's hear it.
This is
As
good.
long
So
as
this
it's
is
good.
it doesn't
Those are
include
good
shark
stories.
teeth, does it?
Oh no, it's a good one. It's a
No,
good.
no.
Greg knows all about this, and he put me in a state of anxiety for about 5 years because of this. So
Yeah, we're all Greg. Yeah,
It's my job.
So
Yeah.
this is when we first met. So it's a bit of backstory. I obviously just started running the Daily Jaws, fairly early days, and I woke up one Sunday morning and my Instagram had just blown up. New followers, likes, comments, everything. And I'm like, what is going on? Anyway, someone DM'd me and they said, Greg Nicotero has reshared your post. I'm like, what? So I looked, I'm like, oh, holy cow, okay. So I'm like, one, thank you. That really helped give us a boost and a bit more visibility, and a lot more people started to find us. But then we started to DM, and I'm like, okay, not only is he following us and sharing our content, I'm now talking to the legend himself. So I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, Greg then invites me to London. He goes, would you like to meet up at a Walker store? And I'm like, absolutely, yeah, of course. So I go pick up my ticket, I go in, and I meet Greg, and I've got my little Daily Jaws board that I want him to sign. And he's signing some autographs and gets through his queue. Anyway, I walk up, say, hi, Greg, very nice to meet you. And we start to talk. And then one of the most amazing Jaws memories in terms of my Jaws journey happened. Greg pulled out his phone, and obviously in a Jaws poster phone case, and he just casually went into his phone camera roll, and he didn't even say anything. He just showed me his phone, made sure I was looking at it, and then just started to swipe. And I'm like, I think I know what I'm looking at. And I remember this moment, Greg. I said, is that what I think it is? And you went, what do you think it is? And I said, is that the junkyard shark that's gone missing? And he went, might be. And I'm like, don't play this cool. Anyway, I'm like, have you got it? And he was like, yeah. I said, what are you doing? And he told me the plan about the restoration for the Academy Museum. And I was like, oh my God. I had to keep that secret for 5 years, Greg. Honestly,
That's so funny.
That was so tough. That's why I lost my hair.
I didn't realize
that's
it was that long.
That's so
I think it was
funny.
about that. I think it was about that. I think it was about 4 or 5 years.
Because they look. I mean, before the Academy acquired that shark, I tried, like 25 years ago, I tried to buy it from the junkyard. I went in and I just said to the guy, "I'll give you $5,000 for it," and they were like, it's kind of up there. And the guy who had that You Pick Parts lot was just a pack rat. And I said, look, I'll arrange to get it down. There won't be any sweat, and I'll give you a couple $1,000s. And then when Joe Maddalena had that show on Sci-Fi Channel, when he had Profiles in History, or the Collector Show, he went there and interviewed the guy. And I was like, man, how do I get this shark? I just couldn't get the guy to let go of it, because, Universal would just sort of let him have whatever shit was left on the lot. He would just take it. And then I found out that the lot was closing and that he had donated it to the museum. So Joe and I went down to El Monte or somewhere, wherever the shark was, and took pictures of it and looked at it. And that's when sort of the initial discussions about, like, oh yeah, we're going to get this museum open in a couple of years and we want to do this restoration of the shark. I could tell you. I'll find it and text it to you, because I have photos. I'll bet you if I look in my Jaws photo album on my phone.
You save everything. You're really good.
I try to. Okay, here. July 25th, 2016.
Yeah.
So it was 2016 when I went down and they had acquired the show.
God, it's 9 years ago.
Yeah, really.
What?
I was 9.
You're 9. Yeah. You're perpetually 9, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Take care, buddy.
You bet.
In terms of looking at Jaws as a movie, of sort of objectively from a craft perspective, do you think there's any one particular aspect of the craft from Jaws that stands out above anything else that makes it a great movie? Or do you think it's just everything is just firing on all 3 cylinders?
Well, I don't think I could pinpoint one particular thing. I think shooting on Martha's Vineyard and using a lot of the locals as actors lends a unique realism to it.
Mm.
The fact that it wasn't shot in California, and that it was shot on the East Coast, because a lot of, back then they didn't go out very often to shoot movies. Movies shot, in California a lot.
Mm.
The production design, there's something that's very, I wish I could figure out the perfect word to describe it. But I always felt like when you watch Jaws, you're immediately immersed in it. Yeah. Immediately. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it opens the way that it does on the beach, you're pulled into this world. The door's opened and you're invited in. And once you're in, it feels unlike any other world that you've ever been in. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why Jaws has that impact. Look, you could look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, you could look at Planet of the Apes, you could look at a lot of those other movies that are world building. But Jaws did something really unique by creating this sort of man versus beast scenario. Mm-hmm. And that, that the orca is a character in the movie, and that you really genuinely feel, you feel like you're in this strange world. And I don't know how best to really, I don't really know how best to really describe it, but it's very immersive for me. For sure.
That's how I feel about the movie as well. I remember watching it when I was about 5-6 years old, and one of the first things, and again, I don't think I even was aware of Jaws when I saw it, because it was just on TV one night. But the first thing that we sort of introduced to as an audience is those two notes in darkness, before even the credits start rolling. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is very different. And all of a sudden because I was used to watching Superman, The Wizard of Oz, and those sort of fantastical, bright coloured, children sort of driven movies. Sort of children targeted kind of movies. But this was very, very different. And it was, I think, to your point about the world building, because Steve Spielberg used locals and he shot on a live location, it felt like a very real world building. It wasn't just about world building for the sake of world building. It played a part in the story. And again, it's almost like the hero is only as good as his villain. Well, in this case with Jaws, there isn't really a villain, so to speak, but it's like the characters are only as believable as the world they inhabit and the characters they're with, and for me, it's one of the underrated aspects of the movie, I think, in terms of the craft, just that world building, it's incredible. And
I think that has a lot to do with Joe and with, Steven's desire to shoot on location, and not on a back lot, or not in California or up in Carmel or somewhere. The idea that they're like, oh, we need a place that's got an inlet so that we can put the shark in. And, I'm always fascinated when I meet and see Joe and talk about just what the process was, that Jaws book, that's behind you.
Yes.
I love that was Joe's process, and, that they came from, that sort of studio mentality of, we're going to shoot Night Gallery, and, we're just going to reuse sets and shoot everything, on the back lot. And it went from that to like, oh yeah, now we're going to go and we're going to film this movie. And it's just fascinating. And yeah, world building is a huge part of what makes Jaws successful. And like I was saying earlier, using the locals and people, it adds an authenticity to it that I don't think, the movie would have been as successful if it hadn't been done that way.
Jaws is also one of those movies that's very difficult to place in terms of genre. Do you think it belongs in any particular genre?
No, but Jaws does have a timeless element to it. I think the only thing that really let you know what year it is the cars and the clothing. When Dreyfus shows up with the blue denim hat, and you're kind of like, oh, that's 70s. But the rest of it, you don't really know what year it is. It could be, if it could have been a very different time.
Mhm.
So I think that timeless quality of it doesn't date the movie.
Mm.
And I think that goes a long way to sort of the experience that you're looking at a snapshot of something that happened, and that snapshot could move. That could have been in the early 80s. That could have been in the late 60s. You just don't know really when it is, aside from, like I said, the clothing and the cars.
Mm. And then we got 3 more movies: Jaws 2, Jaws 3D, and Jaws: The Revenge. What are your thoughts on the sequels?
Well, I love Jaws 2, only because I was so enamored with Jaws that I just needed to love Jaws 2. The soundtrack is magnificent. Jeff Kramer's magnificent. All the actors, I'm friends with a lot of them.
Mm.
It's a super fun movie. It's just very different. And on the heels of what Jaws was, how do you make something that's that is within the spirit? And not a lot of sequels have succeeded. Aliens, I think, is such a different movie than Alien that you can look at those 2 movies and be like, you know what, they both exist on their own as individual pieces of art. So Jaws 2 was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. I watched it again not long ago, and I had a really good time with it. I think it would have been interesting to see if they could have gone a little more of a departure from the original movie, because the original movie, I don't think Jaws 2 is scary. And, whereas the original Jaws really does have a sense of dread and foreboding in it. Whereas I don't think Jaws 2 has that. Jaws 2 is more of an adventure movie than it is, than it is a horror movie. I mean, if you want to call Jaws a horror movie. The other 2, I can't really. I saw Jaws 3 in the theater with Tom Savini. Tom Savini and I went to the theater to see Jaws 3 together. And I just remember we both left with massive headaches because the 3D glasses just fucked with my eyes.
Yeah. What about Jaws: The Revenge? Have you ever seen that? I'm guessing you have.
Yeah, I saw it in the theater. Of course I saw it. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard because so much of what made the first movie fantastic and the second movie entertaining just got lost. The subsequent movies.
It's really difficult to kind of just keep that idea going. It's just, the second movie was great, but it's just
not. It just wasn't. Those 2 are not examples of a direction that I would have gone with. But again, like, the movie was the biggest movie in the world for 3 years until Star Wars came out. 2 years.
Yeah.
So, it's lightning in a bottle, and, they want to recreate that.
So, Greg Nicotero, are you ready for some controversial quickfire questions?
Yes, I love quickfire, especially all of the interviews I've ever done. The UK quickfire questions that are the best.
All right, so no pressure. Okay.
No pressure for you.
So, Greg, from the first movie, out of Chrissy, Pippet, Alex, the estuary victim, Ben Gardner, and Quint, if you can only save one, who would you save and why?
Who'd you save? Oh, I would save Quint, because I think Quint redeems himself by he's got such a vendetta and everything that he's gone through. I think when that sort of tide shifts and he sort of embraces the relationship with Hooper and Brody, and he's like, oh, you get this little needle through his skin, and I'm like, oh, he's redeemed. I would have liked to have seen him not get eaten alive.
Good answer. Next question. Did they need a bigger boat?
Yes. Without a doubt.
Okay, this is the last of the quick fire questions. And
that's
question.
it? Only 3? Shit.
Only three. Well, I know you're pushed for time, so we're going to do 3.
No, we can do a couple more. These are fun.
Are you sure?
If you got
I've got 2 more. Well, no, actually, I'll tell you what. We'll do two more.
Okay.
Did Pippet live? Because we didn't see him die, right?
He's gone. He got swallowed whole.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you seen my video on Pip at the dog? I don't think you have that, have you?
You know what? I think I have. When did you? I'm sure I have.
It was a few years ago, because there's a shot, when Michael Brody is brought back to shore after the estuary attack.
Yes.
And Roy Scheider is running towards the camera, and then he vaults over the bridge.
Yeah.
If you look in the background of that shot, there's a black Labrador dog. Could be Pippet.
Maybe Pippin had a twin brother.
Maybe. To be honest, I think he probably did get swallowed whole, but there might be a chance.
I think the movie insinuates by seeing, if you hadn't seen the shot of the piece of wood floating, then you could have anticipated that maybe he came out somewhere else. But no, he's gone.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, you hit it here first, guys. Pippet is toast. Okay. The last quickfire question, Greg. This is the one that keeps Jaws fans up at night for the last 50 years, and I'm really hoping you can help us with this. Okay, so bearing in mind everything that happened in Jaws, how is Mayor Vaughn still the mayor in Jaws 2?
I think because Mayor Vaughn probably twisted it, because he's the one that hired Quint to go after the shark. $10,000 a day, I think Mayor Vaughn's re-election campaign was, I'm the guy that killed the shark.
I think you might be right. It's the only explanation. No one's actually been able to give us an answer. Greg, we're coming to the end. I have my final question, which is, why are we sitting here talking about Jaws after 50 years? I mean, what is the legacy of this movie?
Because of the impact that it had on the entire planet. It's something that universally you could say the word Jaws and everybody knows what you're talking about in any language at any time of day. Before that, it would have been like, oh, are you going to the dentist? Like Jaws now is synonymous with a giant shark. I still think it's funny when some people call the shark Jaws. They're like, oh, the shark Jaws. I'm like, it's not right, Jaws. I think it landed in the zeitgeist at the perfect time. It was shepherded by the perfect visionary, and with two producers who I always my impression of Zanuck and Brown was they were so hot on Steven that they just kind of were like, he's done Sugarland Express. He's this new up and coming kid. He's got this. I always am very curious how often they were actually there on set, or if they just were there when trouble was brewing. Because I'm curious. I have to ask Joe that question, or Jeff. But they made a lot of mistakes. They built the shark in LA and then they trucked it out and they never tested it and they hadn't anticipated what it would have done in the water. But still, if you think about the fact that they built that entire shark platform, that they could sink it into the water and attach the shark to it, and it would, back then, I still am sort of in awe of the engineering marvel that was that, just the platform itself, let alone building the shark. So I just think that movie, it sort of redefined a lot of inspiration of like what people were inspired by and how it affected them, and it affected them all in different ways.
That's amazing. Greg, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Guys, I've been Ross for the Daily Jaws, speaking with the one and only Greg Nicotero. Plenty more 50th anniversary interviews to come, but until next time, I'll drink to your legs and I'll bid you a fond farewell and adieu.
Cheers.
That's it for today's deep dive into Jaws, the film that turned beaches into no-swim zones and created the summer blockbuster. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow, rate and review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, just when you thought it was safe to stop listening, there's plenty more episodes to come. Thanks again to Stern Pinball for making this episode possible. Please be sure to check out the work of Minorities in Shark Sciences and also the Tourette's Association of America. That's it for now, guys, but I'll catch you next time. I'll drink to your legs.